is hooked on something here. That's the problem. For those watching on home, I'll try this without supervision.
They're actually not watching on their phone. They're watching on the internet, on Facebook, or
That's
LinkedIn.
true.
Yeah.
But they could be at home. Well, you're probably right. There could be a way.
Or they could watch on their phone. I see what you're saying. Because a phone now is a PDA. Okay, I got it. They are watching on their phone. I stand corrected.
Well, who knows? But they're watching. We're glad they're watching. Today on Finishing Well, a pension for life. That's a little bit of a play of words. But IRAs and 401ks. And last week we talked about the politics and perhaps even the whole subject is a place where a lot of folks, including myself, are in denial. You know, we don't want to necessarily dive in, but if we begin to shed some light on these understandings and provide some truth, Hans, what's some information that you would share that probably not many people understand about 401ks and IRAs?
Well, last week, try to keep the statistics and numbers to a minimum. Last week we shared that it's just about $1 trillion that gets passed out or paid out to 67 million.
Yes,
It's not 67 billion. It's 67 million beneficiaries, okay? And about $12,000, $13,000, $14,000, $15,000 a year average each. And this week, well, just before, and then the other statistic that we gave is that the Social Security Trust Fund has $3 trillion in it, okay? That doesn't mean a lot to a lot of people, but that's a whole lot of money. And I wanted to just alleviate everyone's fear that it's not running out of money anytime soon. And we've got a lot of management techniques the government does to try to prevent it from running out of money. This week we're talking about IRAs and 401ks is what we're also going to live off of during retirement. And a couple of new statistics. There's $8.2 trillion in IRAs that Americans have in IRAs. That's the balances collectively for the whole country. So that's 2.5 times, almost 3 times the Social Security Trust Fund. There's $7.3 trillion in what are like 401ks and 403bs and defined contribution plans that are like an IRA, but they're held at the employer. There's $8.5 trillion in money to back up pension plans. And there's another $2.1 trillion in annuity reserves, which an annuity is just like Social Security or a pension. It's got to have reserves to back up that they can make the payments as long as people live. So there's a total of $26.1 trillion in retirement assets. And just to put that in perspective, the national debt is $22 trillion. So we have enough retirement assets in the United States to pay off all the national debt.
And then a ton, because if you had the $3 trillion of Social Security, that's nearly $30 trillion. But how that's managed, obviously.
Well, the IRA money and the 401k money is managed by you all, by the listeners. If you got money, you're in charge of how that's invested. You're in charge of when money comes out, when it goes in, what percentages due, and there's a lot of folks, in my experience, haven't taken that responsibility real seriously, or if they've taken it seriously, they've done it with a lot of fear-based decisions.
But getting back to a little bit of the history of this, like we talked about with Social Security, they were actually Gerald Ford set legislation into making this stuff happen because people were changing jobs a lot more frequently in these generations, and companies were going bankrupt and pension plans were getting wiped out.
Yeah, he created the IRA and subsequently the 401k, and they called them something different then, but just where you'd have a pool of money that you're in charge of that you can live on in retirement, and gave it super duper tax favored status.
Right. And so here's this phenomenal resource. I mean, oh my word, $30 trillion, in different ways in pension type funds. But to put a face on that, and again, like we talked about last week, for such a time as this, God's given you this understanding of these things and what the benefits are of them and how to manage them. Was there a time with an IRA or 401k where you felt God say, oh, okay, this is where we can really help these folks?
Well, yeah, and the people I'm going to tell you about are about 10 years into retirement. So I want to talk, before I get into them, if you're not retired yet, so your job is to accumulate money in these accounts, either in your 401k or to deposit to your IRA, and to grow the balance and to invest it wisely so that you have a larger and larger amount. On the day you retire, your needs from this are going to completely change. Now you've got a hunk of money that you need to create an income that needs to last as long as you live.
That's the whole idea of pension for life.
Yeah. And so my sense is that folks are generally not real well prepared for this. And I've made a business out of this. Is one of the things we do for people when they come to us. I also want to talk about is this whole show is based upon my book and the two books, the Complete Cardinal Guide to Planning for and Living in Retirement and the Workbook Edition. And if you go to my website, cardinalguide.com, you don't have to buy the book. You can download a chapter by chapter of both books.
There's a workbook.
There's a workbook, and you can download a chapter. You go to the 7 Worries tab, and you'd go down to IRAs and 401ks. Click on it, and you can see where you can download this chapter for free. Or you can buy the whole book. And what I'm going to do this week is that anybody that wants to go to cardinalguide.com and you want to send me a message, and you just type in their book offer. If you give us your address or your email address, we'll send you an email one. If you give us your physical address, we'll send you a paper one. We'll do that absolutely free. So you just put those words in there. It came from that. But in any case, we want to get you this information. So now to the folks that we were talking about is 2 weeks ago, I went out to see a client down what we say in North Carolina here, down east. Okay? And down east means way on the other side of Raleigh. Okay, a small town. These are great people. They live in a small house that's been paid for years. They're 75 and 74 years old. They live off their Social Security. They tithe to the church. Okay, and they're out of that. They have their IRA. They have $330,000 in IRAs between the two of them. Both of them worked. And the only thing that they've ever pulled out of the IRA is the minimum distribution, which started at 70 and a half, so just a few years ago. And best part about this whole story, just a wonderful family. They have great-grandchildren as well as grandchildren and their children. They take this $12,000 a year minimum distribution, and they pay the taxes, they tithe on it, and then they take the whole family on a vacation, like down to the beach in North Carolina or down to Disney World. So that part, I want to keep that going, and so do they, which is really nice. They have another about $100,000 that they've just saved of money that's outside of their IRA and CDs, that sort of thing. So when the purpose of the meeting, when we went down to see them, they had carried Medicare supplements with us for years, and they really wanted to take a hard look at long-term care, and they wanted to figure out a way to pay for and buy long-term care. We had sent Tom the book, and he had read the whole thing, both the books, and he was really ready to buy long-term care insurance. And we were just going to figure out that day, like, how we're going to pay for it, which type of policy we're going to buy, whether we're going to buy something with an annual premium or we're going to buy something with a single premium. He liked the idea of using some of this IRA money, but then when I explained some of the downside of using IRA money to buy single premium policies, some of the tax implications, pretty soon we're in the middle of a financial plan, and they're hiring us to do a financial plan, and so we're going to do this in a very thoughtful way. But he really learned something. I said, well, why do you only take the minimum out of your account? Why do you only take $12,000 a year? Well, he just says, that's what the government tells me to take. I mean, I don't need it, so if we didn't have to take that, we wouldn't even take that. And I said, well, that's interesting. So what's this money for? And he had a real hard time telling me what the $330,000 really why it was there. And so I helped him out a little bit with the answer. That money is sitting there to provide an income for you and Chelsea for the rest of your lives. It's not really set there as a savings account. That other $100,000 that you have, that's your savings account. We want to keep as much of that intact. That's your rainy day fund. Because if you all of a sudden needed to pull this $330,000 out all at once, or $100,000 of it, you're going to pay a whole ton of taxes. I think you know that. And he just, at some point in the thing, he's just looked at me, he says, how do you people get paid for this work? The only thing we bought from you is Medicare supplements. I said, well, we'll get into that later, but that was a signal to me that he was putting a lot of value on what I was just kind of giving him on the side here. So where we left is how about instead of taking the $12,000 a year minimum, maybe we come up with a number that's not going to really sting you too much in taxes, of like $20,000, $25,000, $28,000. We have computers and software that'll figure all this stuff. We come up with a number that'll just gradually deplete this IRA over your lifetime, you and the missus' lifetime, and then you're just going to pay taxes a little bit at a time. And if you don't need to spend it, which it doesn't sound like you need to or you want to, how about if we just save it? And that way, when you pass away and you give this to your kids, you're not giving them mortgage money.
Right, that's a big issue, is that if they inherited this $300,000, this is completely taxable at that point.
It is.
And those kids are at a point where their income, normally children, parent, they're at a point where their income's maxed out, so they're in a lot higher income tax category, right, than the parents.
I've got a way to inherit money to your kids, or to pass on money to your kids, tax-free. A multitude of ways, okay? And tax-free is so much better than taxable, especially when it's a lump of money and you might need to spend it on something worthy like education or funding your retirement, or just whatever you got to do, helping your kids buy, or your grandkids buy their first home. I mean, when you got to pull out IRA money in a lump and it's not done in a systematic way, the tax implications are terrible. So, I'm telling you this whole story because an IRA needs a plan for the whole of retirement. And these folks are 10 years into retirement, and they've never really had that. I was informing them of things, and my book informed them of just some basic things. And I'm going to tell you about one other thing that when I was learning.
Before you tell us one other thing,
yeah.
we got to go to a break here in a second.
Okay.
You're listening to Finishing Well with a certified financial planner, Hans Scheil. His book, The Cardinal Guide to Planning for and Living in Retirement, again, there at cardinalguide.com. Today's show is a pension for life in so many different ways. When you think about how can we use the resources God's given us to actually add life to ourselves and to our families. So much more coming up. Stay tuned.
It's wonderful. Yeah. So what I was going to add is I left out the best part of it when I told you the story, is the QCDs. And you're going to look at me like, what's a QCD? You could probably think of a funny joke that is a QCD. Take a guess. What do you think a QCD is?
I don't know.
That's why I won't call it a QCD, or I'll define it real quickly. It's a Qualified Charitable Deduction. Okay? So this gentleman, I found out when I met him that his dad was a Baptist preacher, because they were explaining to me how he ended up in this small town in North Carolina, and she's from there. He's from Tennessee. His dad was preaching the church when he was a kid there, and they're from there, and they've stayed there the whole time. They tithe, and she mentioned their church is small enough that thank God that a number of people tithe, because it keeps the church going.
Sure.
And I said, how much tax deduction do you get from your tithing? I mean, he's tithing about $4,000 or $5,000 a year? He said nothing. But that doesn't stop me from tithing. He just didn't say it should. I said, would you like to know of a way you could get a tax benefit from that? I said, because you're over 70 and a half, we're going to take your tithing directly out of your IRA and send it to the church.
Right.
For any amount you want. And then what we talked about is we can add, you're getting a tax benefit, so if you could add to your tithing if you wanted to for the benefit of the taxes that you're saving. He liked that idea.
No, this is awesome. Yeah, we got to go here.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. And so, yeah.
That is awesome. Oh, I think you're going to be so glad that you've tuned into this part of Pension for Life. We're talking about 401ks and IRAs today with certified financial planner Hans Scheil, and brought to you by CardinalGuide.com. But I mean this sincerely when I tell you that you're really in for a treat today, because you're going to find out what a Q, why you want to give on Q. Something called a QCD. I never heard. But when we get into this story that we've been talking about Tom and Chelsea, right, and their unique situation with this IRA money, what the benefit is to the church. And when you hear this, I think you're going to hear how it brings life. Here's a pension that is literally bringing life to people. They're going to hear the Word of God. They're going to hear the gospel in so many different ways as we have a chance to invest in the kingdom. I mean, we're talking kingdom bucks here, right, Hans?
Well, we are. And so I neglected to tell Robby this piece of it in the beginning before the show and preparing about what a QCD is. And we had a little fun kicking around. But a QCD is a Qualified Charitable Distribution. And what that means in plain English is you can take money out of your IRA and give it directly to the church or any other qualified charity, and you never have to pay taxes on it. It never shows up on your tax return. And you can only do this if you're over 70 and a half. Okay? And I got to think that if a number of preachers really heard this, or you're listening to it, you might want me to come out and talk to some of the parishioners in your church.
Yeah, we're trying to give you a cue here.
Because these people, so he's got $330,000 in the IRA. He's taken out $12,000 a year in minimum distributions, paying a little bit of tax, and he is it grows it back and spending that on a vacation for the family, which is all nice. But these are people, like a lot of people in America, they're living off their Social Security check. Everything's paid for. They don't live a fancy existence, but they're very happy, very comfortable, and they don't really ever see needing this IRA. That's why they haven't really ever put a plan together for it. But if they do nothing, they're going to be passing to their kids what we refer to as a tax bomb, because their kids are going to pay a whole lot of tax getting that money out of the IRA after their death. So as an alternative, we talked about taking out substantially more than the $12,000. We'll figure out the number on substantially when we put it into his financial plan. But the piece that I left out is before we do any of that, I asked him, I said, how much tax benefit are you getting from the tithing that you do to your church? Because he told me that he gives about $4,000 or $5,000 a year to the church in his 10% tithe. And he was real quick to tell me nothing, but that doesn't stop me from doing it, and obviously that's good. And I said, what if I could show you a way that you could get a tax benefit out of that? And he thought, well, that'd be wonderful. Show it to me. And I said, it's real simple. We take the money directly out of your IRA and we send it straight to the church. We're probably simpler to do this once a year. The church is going to love you. They'll get your whole year's contribution in January. But we could do it quarterly, or, it'll just be a few more. But point being, that money is never going to show up on your income tax return. You can do up to $100,000 a year per person that way. So if somebody has a huge IRA, this is a wonderful way to do charitable deductions. But, back to the real world, he's just thrilled. So we're going to...
Yeah, so he went from where he was getting no real tax benefit to his tithe, but now taking it out of this taxable income from this IRA, now it's going straight, and that money is like the money that he would have paid his tithe with the Social Security. He's now not having to pay that because the money from the IRA is paying it, and it's tax-free.
You want to get with somebody like me or a CPA that's familiar with these things before you start doing this, because it all needs to be done
right.
Because you're still going to get a 1099, but it's going to have a special box. You don't have to account for it on your tax return. I mean, there's a bunch of little business that you need to do with it, but it's a wonderful way to donate money to a charitable cause or to the church.
Right. So essentially, he's taken this money over here that he was paying out of what his Social Security was, and so now he has that. And then you were giving him other plans for long-term care, right?
Well, yeah. And so what we really want to do is we want to take a good bit of that $100,000 of savings that he has and use it to buy a single premium long-term care policy that's going to cover both of them. He's really excited about that. He just is not excited about draining his savings so much. So we got to do a little bit of creative work, and that might be that we're going to pull out a substantial amount out of the IRA to create that money just this 1 year. We also might just decide to create a long-term care policy that just has an ongoing premium to it, and then we'll just pay that out of those increased distributions. So what started this whole process and him working with us is figuring out the most efficient way to get him covered for long-term care. Okay, and so that brought us into the IRA. Then we start looking at his tax situation. We're already handling his Medicare. You got taxes with long-term care benefits. You start mixing it all together like soup. What he really needs is a financial plan, and we do those very inexpensively.
So for those of us totally ignorant out there, like when you say IRA versus 401k versus defined benefit, can you kind of give us the skinny on what those things mean?
Sure. An IRA is an individual retirement account. And the only way you're going to get money in an IRA is if you put it there, okay? And there's two ways to do that. Is one, you can make an annual contribution. The second thing you can do is you can roll over money that's in your 401k into an IRA. You say, well, why would I want to do that? Well, it gives you more control over it than you have when you leave it in your 401k for all of retirement. Then you're going to be dealing with your employer forever, and you're going to be dealing with the rules of the 401k. Sometimes that's the best choice. Some 401ks offer enough benefits that we recommend that. Only after some research. A lot of people want to get it out of there, but they don't want to pay taxes on it yet. So they move it into an IRA, custodian to custodian. So a 401k is a defined contribution plan. A defined benefit plan, you have no control over the money. That's just like your old-timey pensions, where you work at the power company for 30 years, and they just promise you $2,000 a month for the rest of your life when you retire, if you retire at a certain age. And now some of those actually offer cash-out options now. So some of those pension plans just want to be rid of these pensioners. So instead of giving you the monthly pension, they're going to offer to write you a check, and you just sign away the lifetime benefits.
That's a scary situation, isn't it?
Real scary. You definitely want to hire somebody, a fiduciary like me, to help you with those. You don't want to just sit down and say, what do you think, Mom? Or go to the pension person that's there. I mean, you really need to get a professional.
Because they're going to want to give you a one-time payout, but the tax implications on that are...
Well, but you can roll that over. So that's an earlier story. On an earlier episode, we talked in my book about a lady that the employer told her she had to take the check, and she took it. She had a huge... But if somebody offers you a buyout of a pension plan, for a lot of clients, we actually get in touch with the employer. I mean, we get in there and call them up and get involved in things, and then we'll arrange for that to be rolled over into an IRA. So we'll protect the tax status of it. But you got to have everything done You have all the paperwork filled out right.
And then there's that other word that they just throw in there, and this as if it isn't confusing enough, Roth.
Oh, yeah. So what's a Roth? So a Roth is an IRA. It's a Roth IRA as opposed to a traditional IRA. So I didn't throw that traditional word in before, and all that means is all IRAs were traditional IRAs until they invented the Roth. And that's, by the way, about 20 years ago. And what a Roth IRA is, it's a tax-free account. So that means that the money inside of it grows tax-free, and when you pull distributions out of it, those are tax-free. So you say, well, why wouldn't I want that? Well, the reason you wouldn't want that, possibly, is you got to pay all, if you want to convert your traditional IRA to a Roth IRA, you got to pay all the taxes upon conversion. And it generally doesn't make sense to pay those out of the IRA. You really need to have that much money sitting on the sidelines, or you need to do it over several years. So makes a lot of sense for some people, but we could do a lot of those where we consider them, and then when we get down to the end, they even make sense. People are nodding yes until it comes time to write a check, and then they're going like this.
So if you're at the point, the younger person who's now deciding, should I invest my money in a Roth IRA or should I invest my money in a traditional IRA, is there some wisdom along those lines?
Real simple. Put it in the Roth. You're not going to get the tax deduction. So let's say if you can put $5,000 in an IRA this year, let's just say you're a young person, that's how much you can put in, and you have the $5,000. If you put it in a traditional IRA, you're going to get a $5,000 tax deduction. So you're going to write that whole $5,000 off your income taxes. That's nice. That's like handing you $1,500 or whatever, but not really taking it away from you yet.
Yet.
Okay. So if you put it in a Roth, you're going to part with the tax deduction. But if you put it into a Roth, now it's in a Roth, you can add to it later, and you're never going to pay any tax on that money. It's going to accumulate and grow, and then when you spend it, when you're older and wiser, or you inherit it to somebody, or you live and you never touch it, you've got, it's tax-free money. So it's wonderful in creating an IRA. You're going to part with the tax deduction. It's still wonderful to convert one or to change over in the middle. It's just going to cost you a pretty penny. So you're going to really, again, need a professional to sit down and do the math on that for you.
And the concept of pension for life, what a neat thing that we talked about at the beginning of the show. Trillions of dollars in assets that really, we've been given the stewardship by God of how can we best use this for the kingdom, and what wisdom to be able to use this QCD.
Oh yeah, it's wonderful, and I do come out and do programs at churches, and where I'll just talk about the book and talk about some of these subjects. And if anybody wants to call me up later and do business with me, wonderful. We do a lot of that kind of stuff, and I would be happy to, get a whole church on this program, and you can fund your budget with the perhaps with some IRA money that's just sitting there.
It is cardinalguide.com. Hans Scheil with cardinalguide.com. His book, right, which we talk about all the time. You might want to check that out. He's giving you an offer right now. All you have to do is email him that I want the free book, and they're going to mail one to your house or send you the e-book if you have an email. So that's the complete Cardinal Guide to planning for and living in retirement with certified financial planner Hans Scheil. Cardinalguide.com. Again, Hans, a pension for life. How cool is that?
It's pretty awesome. I need to get on the phone with James.
I do. How cool is that?
Yeah.
We better shut that down.
I think that's understandable. I think we're getting, I think all our shows have been understandable, but I think that we're getting to